One of NATO's longest-serving top officials, Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg, has handed over the reins to former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. In a ceremony at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Stoltenberg handed over the gavel to new NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte. The new chief said he can't wait to get started. His predecessor said he has the perfect background after juggling the interests of 4 coalition governments in the Netherlands. The change in the leadership happens as the transatlantic military alliance confronts some of the biggest challenges since the Cold War.
In his new job, there will be no grace period for Mark Rutte. He takes over from Jens Stoltenberg as NATO Secretary-General at a time of great uncertainty for the military alliance.
I'm proud. I'm very proud. And it also feels like a huge task and big shoes to fill from Jens Stoltenberg.
Rutte served 14 years as Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Some people miss him here already, says Nienke de Zutten, a journalist who's covered Dutch politics throughout Rutte's term in office. She describes him as easygoing, chatty and very solution-oriented.
Some people say he is the perfect guy for the NATO because he doesn't really have very strong opinions of himself. He is someone who wants things done. But it doesn't really matter how it's done.
As Dutch Prime Minister, Rutte shaped many of NATO's decisions. He is considered a strong supporter of Ukraine and a skilled negotiator. When Turkey and Hungary threatened to block his nomination as NATO chief, he went out of his way to gain their full support, even promising Budapest the possibility of opting out of military help for Kyiv. It was a controversial move, but it kept the alliance together.
With Mark Rutte, NATO allies have chosen a safe pair of hands. He's got a reputation as a pragmatic dealmaker and a track record of consensus building, traits that will probably help him to take on the challenges the alliance is facing.
It's not going to be a walk in the park, Oana Lungescu tells me. She served 13 years as a spokesperson under 2 NATO chiefs, Anders Fogh Rasmussen and Jens Stoltenberg.
This was on the first day when we were going to the press conference. And we had worked on his 100 days plan.
Lungescu says increasing defense spending across the alliance will be one of the most crucial issues Rutte will need to tackle.
It's not been easy for the Netherlands under his leadership to reach the NATO benchmark of investing at least 2% of GDP in defense. But of course, it's clear that with the current very robust defense plans that NATO has, NATO allies will need to invest more than 2% in defense. And that's an area where Mark Rutte will need to show leadership.
However, Rutte's most challenging task might be to keep the US aboard NATO should Donald Trump be elected again. Both men seem to get along. Rutte even earned the nickname the Trump Whisperer. But he also strongly opposed Trump's protectionist economic policy.
So he can be both firm, but also have a very good relationship with American leaders.
But leaving his home neighborhood in The Hague will also mean that Rutte, best known for riding his bike to work, presumably has to give up some of his personal freedoms. After all, serving as NATO chief is a highly visible job with a lot of security.
And our correspondent Terry Schultz is at NATO headquarters. I asked her if this could be seen as the beginning of a new era for the alliance.
In many ways, of course, it's a new era because Jens Stoltenberg has been here so long that for many people, he's the only Secretary General they've ever known. He's the second longest serving person to hold this job. And if you remember 10 years ago when Stoltenberg took over, Russia had just staged its first invasion of Ukraine, taking over Crimea and the Donbass area. So it's been a very tumultuous decade. And Stoltenberg said himself that it's hard to leave the alliance, but that he knows he leaves it in good hands. The new Secretary General Mark Rutte is very much like Stoltenberg, a very calm guy, a skilled negotiator, and this is going to come in very handy with 32 countries to wrangle.
Exactly. He is known as a master negotiator. So where do you think he's going to need this skill the most?
That's right. His nickname is Teflon Mark, and he is going to need that here at NATO. And the thing about NATO is that you need to come to consensus. All 32 countries need to agree for anything to be considered a NATO decision. And they don't take votes here. There's no putting your hands up around the table. But he needs to get all 32 leaders or 32 ambassadors, depending on the level of the decision, to agree. Nobody can oppose it. Otherwise, NATO cannot come out with a common position. So this is very difficult, and there are very divergent views. Think about the alliance ranges from Turkey to Hungary to the United States to Canada to the Nordic countries. These are a lot of different sort of regional positions to bring into one common view.
Now, you mentioned it, Jens Stoltenberg. He does loom large. What can Rutte learn from him?
In fact, Mark Rutte this morning, as the two men stood together after a wreath-laying ceremony, remarked on how they've been working together since 2010. They've been, sharing views on what NATO should be, as Mark Rutte was such a prominent leader as head of the Netherlands. And surely they've been doing a lot of behind-the-scenes preparation. And I would just point out that this is very different from the handover ceremony we saw 10 years ago when Anders Fogh Rasmussen handed over to Jens Stoltenberg. There was no joint ceremony. So it's very clear that these two leaders have been working hand in hand to make sure it's a smooth transition. And that's, in fact, one of the reasons why Mark Rutte was the first choice of many NATO leaders. He's seen as very similar to Stoltenberg. And we often hear he's a safe pair of hands for the alliance in a very tumultuous time.
DW correspondent Terry Schultz, thank you so much for your reporting.
Rutte spoke to reporters and admitted that the situation on Ukraine's battlefield is difficult, but he added that Russia's advances come at a very high cost. He also said Ukraine's right to self-defense does not end at the border.
Let's not forget, Ukraine is fighting a war of self-defense. And that means that Ukraine has the right to defend itself. And as we know, international law, and according to international law, this right does not end at the border. So that means that supporting Ukraine's right to self-defense means that it is also possible for them to strike legitimate targets on the aggressor's territory. At the end, it's up to each ally to determine its support for Ukraine. That's not up to me. This is for the individual allies in their relationship with Ukraine. And we also have to be clear that not one single weapon alone will win the war. But obviously, this is an important debate.
And we can cross to NATO's headquarters now, where our Brussels bureau chief, Alexandra von Namen, is standing by. Alexandra, we heard Mark Rutte speaking there for the first time as the Alliance's Secretary-General. Just give us a sense of what his top priorities are.
Well, Mark Rutte named today three top priorities. Stepping up support for Kyiv and bringing Ukraine closer to the alliance is one of them. Increasing defense and military spending across the alliance is the second priority. And the third priority for Mark Rutte is to deepen partnerships with countries in the Indo-Pacific. And I have to say that he really, the way how he presented himself made clear that he knows what he's talking about, that he is an experienced politician, that he is ready and able to start this job straight on without a honey period or a grace period. And I think that what the allies were hoping for Rutte to be also a sign of continuity at NATO.
He did talk about the United States, didn't he? He made a very clear point of saying that he will work with whoever becomes the new US president, didn't he?
Yes, indeed, Anja. And I thought at that moment that he was probably thinking that both camps were paying attention to what he had to say. The team of Kamala Harris, of course, but first and foremost, of course, the team of Donald Trump, who has always been an outspoken critic of the alliance. But Rutte today stressed that he worked close together with Donald Trump when he was in the White House. Rutte even gave Trump credit for pushing allies towards spending more on defense and also identifying China as a big challenge for the transatlantic alliance. Rutte described China today as an enabler of Russia's war efforts. So he was quite clear about that, as well as he was clear about his main message on the topic that he is willing and able to work with whoever will win the race for the White House.
Mm-hmm. And he is, of course, as we've been saying, a very experienced politician. He was, for many years, the Dutch Prime Minister. What do you think his appointment will mean now, in particular, for EU, European Union and NATO relations?
Well, I think that many here hope that that will mean a closer cooperation with the European Union as a bloc. As you said, Rutte knows the European leaders. He spent many days together with them, negotiating, arguing about topics, many nights even, because, as we know, summits of the European leaders can be very long. So he knows whom to approach, whom to convince, how to work together. And this is a very important topic for the future of the alliance and also for the future of the European Union, as the Europeans have understood that they need to do more for their defense. They want to ramp up weapons production. They want to coordinate more when it comes to buying new weapons. But that is also those are areas that NATO is also focusing on. So some here at NATO headquarters are concerned that in the end we could see parallel structures and they want to avoid it. So Rutte is probably the right man to make sure that the EU and NATO will strengthen their cooperation and deepen their partnership in the future.
Alexandra, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. That's DW's Alexandra von Namen.
Thank you.